Hi, everybody. We're going to give people a chance to arrive, and then we'll start. Okay, I think we'll start with our introductions. So welcome everybody to the AOBTA Connect and Learn series, and to this month's presentation by Thomas Schieffer, Treating PTSD with Shiatsu. Um, I'm Deborah Valentine Smith. I'm the current president of AOBTA, and part of the production team are Wayne Milan, our managing director, and Brian Scow, our communications consultant. So this series also is going to be part of our upcoming learning platform. You should keep an eye out for that, where we're going to be posting courses that will be available by recording. I want to give you some housekeeping tips about this program. In this webinar, you're in listen only mode, so we can't see or hear you, but you can submit questions for Thomas through the chat function and the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And Brian will be monitoring those, and at the end of the presentation, he'll be fielding those questions to Thomas. Um, this webinar is going to be recorded, and the recording will be made available to you on the event listing of this webinar on the website calendar, and it will also be made available to other people. So be aware that that's going to be posted. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you're going to see either gallery view or speaker view, which give you the choice of leaving the form you're currently in. If you see gallery view, leave the setting alone. If you see speaker view as a choice, please click on it. Okay, so I want to introduce Thomas Schieffer, who's the presenting our PTSD, Shiatsu and PTSD. And Thomas's professional journey to become a Shiatsu therapist began in a roundabout way. He was a helicopter mechanic in the Middle East just after 9/11. And through his own healing journey, Thomas began training with an acupuncturist and herbalist while at the same time starting his own apothecary and herb farm, learning both Chinese and Western herbal medicine. This experience working the land taught him about the deeper aspects of medicine by cultivating therapeutic plants throughout their full life cycle, what Thomas calls Qi medicine. He studied with Shunji Morimoto, a Japanese Shiatsu master, and integrated the Chinese medicine meridian system into the work. He carries Shunji's style of Dao Shiatsu forth and is especially called to work with people who have experienced trauma. So welcome, Thomas.
Thank you.
All yours.
All right, got the stage. So thank you for the intro. So there's some of my teachers. I just want to touch base of where some of my lineage came from and some possibilities out there. There's Shunji Morimoto, and I studied advanced pulse diagnosis from Lonnie Jarrett. And actually, the beginning was with Dr. Yang Jingming. I spent roughly around 10 years on and off studying Qigong with him. And it was my first touch base into the Chinese medicine. Um, and just some of the books on trauma that I've read and are pretty amazing. Um, a lot of them are definitely worth a look if you're working in that medicine. It gives you they're deep books. So if you know Chinese medicine, this is a way to go, of just looking deeper into what causes them. And I'm gonna, in this section, I want to give my understanding from my personal experience and from my clinical experience working with veterans with PTSD and non-veterans, but majority of them more veterans, and what I found and how to work with it. And also, it's my practice, so I'm always up for feedback, and I have a contact info. So if you want to give me some good insights or what have you, please let me know. And I'm always want to learn and expand my understanding of this. That's a pretty complicated thing to take on, but it's part of, I feel, our society now, especially going through all the stuff that happened through the pandemic and whatnot. It's been intense, to say the least. And so it's like, where does trauma start? So these are some good books. They tell you a lot of what's going on. And I'm also going to share some of my personal stories to highlight certain ways of treatment and understanding of trauma. So when you interact with it, then you know how to approach it. And so trauma initially in Chinese medicine is phlegm obscures the heart, and it's disconnection from the heart and kidneys. So what you have is you have the yin and yang. You have the fire element and the water element, and they're starting to separate. There's a place, if you do pulse diagnosis, I'm not sure if you do with Shiatsu, but it's called a husband and wife pulse. So it's between right and left. And the further they separate, the further the heart and kidney start separating. And the further you get apart, eventually you will die. It's the extreme form of that husband and wife pulse, but it's important to pay attention to how the right and left look for each other. And phlegm obscuring heart. So where does phlegm come from? Phlegm comes from, well, your stomach's in charge of, it's like a sub pump of the body. So it's in charge of water. So congealed water, excessive water starts to turn into phlegm and then turns into whatever disease that it starts manifesting into, growths, cancer, mental health issues. So it's like, how do you move that stuckness? And that one obscures the heart, because the heart's so important, because your heart wants to connect. It wants to connect to the world. And that connection, it can't, it's getting frustrated. And so you have a lot of the other organs trying to help the heart out. And then when it gets obscured enough, it starts not seeing the kidneys, and it starts getting further and further from being grounded. So people, they have a saying called the Shen disturbance. So your spirit starts disturbing. And then a good sign of when someone gets really disturbed, they lack understanding social cues. So a person who's really out there will know like when it's appropriate to end a conversation, like simple stuff like that. I mean, we all have our little off moments, and that's when our spirit starts getting a little off. But if someone's really off, they like one symptoms, they just keep talking to you, and you want to end the conversation. And especially you have a clinical practice, you find that a fair amount. And it's like, how do you help that person, get back into their body so they know where they are in the world. And then to look from just a basic energetic standpoint, or kind of Western, is just excessive energy. That stagnation creates heat and resistance. Because I practice under Dr. Yang Ming. He's actually is an electrical engineer, has his PhD there. So a lot of this you could refer to as energy that you plug into the wall. It's kind of almost the same thing. So when this sticks and you have all this energy, and it depends, and trauma's, it's a spectrum. The spectrum varies with every person in every situation. And so it's like, how do you approach that? And that's the biggest question I still ask myself. And I want to get into some of how I got there. So just give you an instance. So I have a clinical practice where I use herbal medicine because I love herbs. They give a great addition and they go home with someone. So it's great to give something where they have, I call inconvenience herbalism, where they take this thing and then they take a part of their life to take care of themselves. They take this herbal remedy, whatever it may be. It's a tea or a pill. I like teas a little bit better because it takes a little more time and a little more patience around it. But it gives them an opportunity to go, oh, I want to take care of myself. And then the Shiatsu component is a whole nother huge level of like interaction. And so my approach and how I came to it is, so I worked a fair amount in the Middle East. So I just wanted to show you, I worked many contracts, military and commercial. So this picture right here is actually the president of Turkmenistan had a $40 million helicopter with a shower inside. That's actually a helicopter. And the interesting thing about that journey is when it started to hit me how hard what I was doing. I had to actually, why there's a scary guy in the upper left corner is actually I worked a fair amount with the Russian mafia out there because that's primarily who controls those providences. And most of them are fine, but it's just a weird environment to be in, especially from a kid who grew up in a small town. So there's this whole level of like interaction and newness that, and a level of security of like, what do I do to survive in these environments? And then what you have to do as working in these environments, you have to adapt quickly. But you do have the capacity to adapt. So in adaptation, there is considered, there's the stress and the terrain. So the terrain on my part, and then I look back to my childhood and to see what was going on. Why would I personally stick myself in some of the most dangerous areas of the world? And having conversations with a lot of the people I do, I mean, it's all in a range. I definitely haven't been in combat, so I haven't been there. And I work with extreme cases and help them out. So, we all have the variation of how these things affect us, and they're all relevant of how we take it in. So my terrain was I didn't have the capacity from a very young age. I was hypersensitive and I didn't know how to deal with the world. In the process of growing up, I was stressed about everything all the time. So what happens when a person's nervous system's stressed? It's kind of like you have a speaker system and you turn up this volume. And if the person has a high amount of stress, it's that volume from 1 to 10. And if their volume is all the way up at 8 consistently, it'll start having major effects on the system. So it's like, where is it in that range of your speaker system? Is it just a mild, like, are you at a 2? And I'm talking about your system, like actually into your nervous system that's ingrained in you. And those systems come from 2 different areas. There's something called nurture and nature. So nurture is from after you're born, and nature is from your genetic upbringing, or just genetic disposition, as I say. So a similar case is from original Jing and post Jing. It's kind of the same thing. So like, where does this stuff manifest from, and how do we have that proper terrain to handle the situations at our doorstep? Because of the trauma is our interpretation. It's our doing. My process through my life is what I have created from that nurture and nature. And it's my decision to do something different with it. So what am I going to do with it? I got to a point where I was making 120,000, 150,000 a year, traveling all around the world, having these amazing things, and everyone around me said I was doing an amazing job, and it was just like, it was supposed to be joyful, and I did not have joy. I literally had a point where I couldn't remember the last time I laughed hard, the good belly laughs. And I decided it was time to change it up. I was trying to find that joy in my life. And what I was doing was really interesting to me, and I was good at it, but it didn't fill me up. So I made a choice to leave. And in the process of like putting myself, because I had that terrain originally in my nervous system, the stressors, it kept allowing me to go to those same stressors. So I saw the world in a certain way, and I'm like, this is what it is. It's a dangerous, unsafe place. I felt the world was not safe, and I didn't like the people in it. So I started going and confirming that, and I got involved with the War Department. So I was a DoD contractor and working in some really dangerous and unsafe places. For the most part, it wasn't super dangerous, but it just takes that 1% of time of going through border patrols with machine guns pointed at you and have them extort money, and it gets a little crazy. And there's two ways when I look back at those moments. They have something called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't like this disorder part of it, but it's catchy, so everyone knows what PTSD is. I believe stress is a rite of passage, and it's our ability to learn how to adapt to it and move out of those situations that aren't healthy into change it into something better and healthy for us. And that is the opportunity. And that's where Shiatsu comes in. And the other part is moral injury. So when I look back at my past and in those environments, and going through some of those situations, the biggest part for me was a moral injury, because I lost hope in humanity when this happened. It hurt me on a level that I didn't want to continue living. I hated what our society was doing, seeing human trafficking, drugs, people hurting each other. And not only one incident, they made a career of it, and took pride in it. And it hurts seeing our society so evil to each other, and lose hope. And I lost hope in our society and our humanity. And then what's interesting too is life always gives you those funny little moments that I met some of the most amazingly nice people. And people that you wonder how they could be so caring in their life, even though they're in some of the worst environments I could imagine anyone living in, because I was there temporarily. It was not a huge problem, but these people existed day in, day out, working with this around those dangers, whether they had to deal with landmines or some dictatorship, or that one we saw a helicopter, it was a dictator. I mean, he controlled everything. And it's like, how do people find that resolution and come together? And I think it's a good time for that. This medicine I'm talking about isn't related to just those extreme environments. It's like, how do we bring it into everyday life? And that Shiatsu is a part of that healing. So my belief is trauma. It's like trauma is something that's holding us up. So we learned a set way to keep us safe from whatever age we were, and we kept continuing that same process. And unless we intervene and change our idea of, well, safety is supposed to be addressed, we'll keep it going. And I consider it's like standing on a ladder. You're on this platform and this ladder, and that's trauma. Trauma is there holding you up. It's maybe not healthy. It's sure not healthy, because trauma in all respect isn't a healthy way to approach life, but it's holding you up. So if you go in there and you think, let's just remove that, let's just go in there and do these deep cleanses and get it all out of there and just pick it away, we're going to fall. And when we fall, we have to find a way to prop ourselves up. And usually, because we haven't learned anything from that fall, we get back onto that trauma. We climb back on because we need somewhere to stand. So I say a properly nourished body will heal itself and detoxify. So when I speak of nourishment, it's not just a nourishment of like, oh, I'm eating some good food. They're organic, they're maybe vegan or vegetarian and whatever you want to go by. Is it nourishing you on the deepest level? Is that food, like every time you eat it, is it like your body relax and you're like, oh, that was amazing. What do I want to, I just want some more. And and it extends all the way to, are your relationships, your intimate relationship, your family, your friends, do they all nourish you? Does your work nourish you? Does your pastime nourish you? Are you doing stuff just because it's socially acceptable and you want to fit in? And maybe you do stuff just to fit in because it's what your group's doing, but as long as that's nourishing, it's like, how does it all really nourish you? Every aspect of your life, to look at it and to really contemplate it and question. And then, and it's also an aspect of like, work your butt off to ask those questions, but also relax around it. You're not going to find this in a book. There's going to be methods to get there. There's so much diversity and so many opportunities out there. I've settled on Shiatsu because I love it. Like it's an amazing way to touch people and have them heal. And on the process of treating trauma, you always treat trauma first and then work on whatever ailments are after that, because trauma will hold back healing. And it's a ranges. Sometimes they'll hold back a little piece, or sometimes it's a big piece. And that's all depends on what they sustained on trauma and how they interpreted that situation in their life to affect them and alter them. I know if you diagnose through 5 elements through my practice with Lonnie Jarrett, is that he says that we're set with one kind of element. So we're either fire or water or earth. And the only thing that alters it is we obscure it with the trauma. So we may be a fire element and be super flamboyant and love to be out there, but then we obscure it with being an earth person. So then we decide it's better to be more nurturing and hold the group together because that made us safe. That in that environment, we decided to be an earth person, but that's not who we really are. And in that process, there's nothing wrong with earth people, but because we're really a fire person underneath, it hurts us. It hurts us because we're not true to ourselves. So it's finding that truth and uncovering that trauma. And I always have people like, I'm going to dig into that and go into my past lives and put a dig and like really wrench it out. I'm like, it will come up. It will come up to you. You don't have to dig anywhere. There is good to question, but it is there every day of your life. The micro and macrocosmic, the small minutia of the way you talk to people and address people, to the way you just work in your whole life. It will come up and you have an opportunity to work with it. So in the process of some of my clients, I just wanted to give an idea of some of the people I was working with. I like to obscure the names. I wrote a book and I have some of these people in there. And I covered up the names because of confidentiality. But so when I first started, I always liked this John Doe guy who is something called a tunnel rat. So if you don't know, a tunnel rat was from the Vietnam era. So a tunnel rat was usually a smaller guy, somewhere around 5'6", thin build, because they sent him into the tunnels that the Viet Cong dug. And they basically gave him a flashlight and a gun, and he went in there to kill people and to flush out whoever was in there. And in the process, I think the guy said there was a life expectancy of about a half an hour for most people. So basically, it was like a death sentence for most people. And this guy was a career tunneler. He actually taught people how to function in there. So I'm talking about the extreme case. So this guy was so wound up, and I worked with a community acupuncturist at the time. She was putting needles into him, and his air literally started moving and would pop needles out. Like his nervous system was so tight that it did not want to change. So it was just fascinating to see like that needle therapy is very effective. I love auricular acupuncture. I think it's phenomenal. But this method was where the person was at this time was not working. And what was interesting, great guy, very lovable guy. And it's like, how do you reach that person now? So that's where I started to learn about working with PTSD and Shiatsu. And I would do about a probably around 10-minute session. So we'd rotate needles and Shiatsu in the acupuncture setting for a nonprofit for veterans and first responders. And and this guy, so I did Shiatsu on him, and he just would he just kind of passed out, and I'm actually the guy. This is from Vietnam, so this is only 10 years ago. So this guy I've been living with for many years. This like nervous system just really tense, and he had a hard time sleeping, vivid dreams, nightmares, restless, very suspicious of things moving on for good reason, moving around him. And so his nervous system was so tight. So when I did Shiatsu on him, I made it pretty clear of how I was going to work with him, what I was going to do. And I'm going to go over a little more later. But by the end of the 15 minutes, the guy actually fell asleep a bit, and he was like passed out. And I was like, hey, how you doing? And he's like, oh, pretty good. And I was like, do you know you like passed out for a while? I was like, no, I didn't, and just very like stoic person. I was like, so how'd you feel? Like, well, pretty good. And and then I was like, would you think? And he's like, it's okay, and I was like, well, do you want to come back? And he's like, yeah, I'll come back. So for me, that was a win. I mean, someone who had a trouble of relaxing at all, who fell asleep, and in the process of just sitting up and me doing pressure points on them, just simple upper body, no legs, nothing major, just passing out and having that process of feeling better for that short period of time, gave his nervous system a context to run off of. It rebuilt some neural pathways. So his nervous system could learn, oh, this environment is safe. I can relax. So the thing is with trauma is that it pays attention to its environment too much. So if we go down the road and we say, oh, I forget how I even got here, that's normal. Our mind doesn't need the extra information of safe environments. It just goes on with every day, because the trauma people will, because I have people I work on who had, their friends died from IUDs. So it's the landmine went off in the road, and maybe they're injured or whatnot. So now every time they go down the road, they're going to pay attention to everything that's on the road, all the things around it. So they will pay attention to everything. So if you ask them, how's the drive, they'll tell exactly what was going on, but it's consuming a lot of their energy. So how do you turn that down to a healthy way? So they could live their life and not be in that hyper anxiety or that that volume turned all the way up to like 8 or 9. So every time they're at that 8 or 9, any input is going to push them right over the edge, any interaction. Where, because of my past, I was already borderline an 8 and 9 from early ages. So I just put myself in dangerous environments because I just really didn't care anymore. Like I just kept turning up the volume, and it was just hard to interact with life. And it just makes someone close deeper and deeper into their shell because of not trying to have that input. But I go up in a very stoic time where you just pull up your bootstraps and keep on going. But also, if you're in that heightened level for such a long period of time, and what I found out is that it will start hurting internal organs. Your body cannot sustain that long periods of intense anxiety, depression. It starts to chew away at your core energy. In particular, it starts chewing away at your kidneys. So your kidneys are the storehouse of your original Jing. It's what you have for your whole life, and it starts tearing it apart right at the core. And there's also a point, I mean, from that, because your heart's in charge of emotion, it'll start depleting your heart. So your heart and kidneys start to get very depleted from years of obsessing and working with this thing, to a point where there's a point where you cannot get out of it without external intervention. There's no possible way, if you dug yourself so deep, no kind of positive thinking, which does help and it is good to do, but it won't pull you out. And from my personal experience and working with my clients, filling those voids up, filling that, because they're standing on that ladder, filling in something underneath. So when they step off that ladder, they're stepping on something solid. They're not falling down again. And how do you do that? Because I went in this past year from the pandemic, I went to severe heart deficiency, and I was having palpitations, anxiety attacks on a regular basis. And how do I like fill that in? So I had to take some good heart medicine, in particular, Ophipolygonum works really well for heart. And there's a bunch of other great formulas out there. There's a simple one. I think it was Emperor's Classic or something. I forgot the pinyin name for it, but it's like how you nurse the yin of the heart again and the yin of the kidneys at the same time to give them that basis. And another thing too is if you're suffering from severe depression, which I have, that it will actually take away the yang part of the kidneys. Like there's a part that I had a trouble even pushing outwards into my environment. So that retraction was always there. So how do I push out of that thing? So I actually started taking yang, kidney yang formulas, and it helped immensely. And there's plenty out there. So that process helped me do that. And in relating to Shiatsu, is that Shiatsu is nourishing. The particular way I teach it and the way I practice is more to comfort. And we're going on. So I work from the center out, and the particular method I'm working with is because of excess. So if someone's in deficiency, you don't want to do that, because I keep my protocol very basic, because each trauma case is pretty specific, and you should, as a clinician, take some diagnosis and alter your pressure point therapy to fit that person in particular. But I made a general one that was pretty safe. So you always work out unless they're super deficient, and then you work back in, because you want to work out from the core out to the Jing well points, from your fingertips to your toes, and keep it simple. And the other one is approach slow and intentional. So when you intake someone, the first one, just if it's a trauma person, just make the environment safe. That's your main thing. Like, how do you make it safe? Find out what their history is, medical history. Is there any diagnosis? What do they need? Check in with them, explain what shiatsu is going to be, because it's pretty intimate. You're touching them, and most people have a hard time touching, but it also is a way to heal them, because some of these people have not had healthy touch, and I refer to healthy touch. It's intentional, um, and it's kind, and it's allowed. So how do you help them rebuild that part of themselves that probably has some level of unsafe or lack of um, trust in their humanity, like I was going through, of like, here's someone who's intentionally trying to help me out and care for me, and touch is an amazing way to do that. It has helped me profoundly, and what it did for me is it lowered my anxiety in my body. So when I get shiatsu, that volume goes from an 8 or 9, and it goes all the way down to like a 3. It's still there, but it gives me an opportunity to breathe and to do something with that pain, because pain's an indicator. So what is it telling me? What do I need to know? Like I said, things bubble up, and they're going to bubble up right in your face. So it brought it right out in front of me, and I'm like, oh, here you go. And now I could breathe. The moment I get up, I'm not in intense pain. I could do something about it now. I could learn how to meditate. I could learn how to say positive things. All these amazing options that are out there nowadays. But it gives me an opportunity, and that's what shiatsu does. It bypasses our brain, because we're connecting to the very source of where that pain is in our nervous system. And it's literally saying, hey, you're okay. It's going to be okay. And in that process, our body relaxes, our mind relaxes, and we start to go into a better place to help with that healing process. Um, I mean, it's in this process, it's for me, it's important to know all your points. It's important to know the Chinese medicine, but the primary thing is that you're caring about that person, helping them through a difficult situation. And how do you do it? Like, and they'll feel that. They'll feel that process because someone cares about them. Someone validates who they are and in the world, and they get that appreciation, so they could start building from that place. The points are definitely relevant, but I think that's just a part of the treatment. It's important to know the points, but it's not as important as, your bedside manner and your approach and how to work with them and just meet them and love them up. Going in to the pressure points. So I made 2 different sections. I divided up to upper body and lower body. And I made that because the upper body, I wanted to make it more accessible to healthcare providers. So it's more intense when you start touching someone below the waist. It's not our normal cultural thing to do. So it's more intimate. It has some different levels of agreement around there. So in the process, I made my book to one of it's like someone sitting in a chair. So if a nurse comes over to someone and asks them like, oh, can I hit some pressure points to help relieve stress? And they're like, oh yeah, that would be fine. So how can we work with it in every day? That's why I want to see this shiatsu accessible. And that's why the whole reason I wrote a book on it is to make it more accessible. I cut out a lot of the Chinese medicine understanding because some of it's not so relevant. It's important because I like geeking out on it because it's really fun for me. But it also, can you hit some pressure points because you care about your client, your family member, and help them relax a little further. You may not know exactly what those points are about, and we'll go over a little bit about the points, but you're tending to them, and that's just where you come from. If you're wondering that, like, I don't know the proper pressure to do or where the location is, it doesn't matter. Like, it matters in one aspect, but it, like, just make an attempt and open up to the person. Like, this is my first time doing this. How do I press, and give me some feedback, and I want to learn and help you out. And I'm sure a lot of people would be like, yeah, I'm totally down for that. So just like the upper body, I started up with gallbladder 21. I kept it out from the head because I didn't want to like go into that, but just starting here, then you go back to the shoulder, and then you start going down the arm. In particular, gallbladder 21 opens up the shoulders. We have so much shoulder tension, everyone, like, because we work on computers. It's like, how do we're holding that stress and the traps into our gallbladder meridians, and our gallbladder is in charge of chi flow, gallbladder liver. So how are we approaching it? And gallbladder is in charge of also decision making. So we're having a difficult time making decisions because we're overtaxed with stress. So we're just wobbling back and forth. We're not just on point going, this is what I want to do, this I don't want to do. Gallbladder is in charge of that. It's the general. So it opens up the shoulders, brings us into a higher self-consciousness, connects the heart and head. And connects us with benevolence. So it's like that one point right up where it transitions from the trap to the neck really helps ground and move that extra energy that's trapped in our head, our thought patterns, start moving it out. Another one on the lower body is gallbladder, kidney 1. That's a huge point that I'm sure I'll get to, but so it's then just going further down from there. I could share this presentation. You could look it over and see what's in there, or you could buy the book, and how each point will start relating to it. And I picked very general ones that I found and I use in my daily practice just to be very effective and very general. I start altering them depending on my clients, but I have the ability to diagnose and treat along with the herbs. So it's like, where do you want to start? And this is a great place to start. So you start going through the points, start up to the neck and work your way down. Like I have large intestine and lung. So that's one point. It's so easy. And it's a great way to get people started in pressure point therapy, to just do that themselves. So just having them feel what it is. So they're like, oh, that's a sensitive point. And you're like, that's what it's like to have a pressure point. So then you get them involved in their own self-care. And it's easy. They could do it in the middle of the day and no one could look at them like, what the heck are you doing? You're pressing your like back, or like it's socially acceptable to use these points, and you just start pressing some on your hand and you can dramatically alter your energy and help them engage into their own health, and something they can do within on a fly. So my all about is like making Shiatsu accessible. So how do you make it accessible for your clients and not overwhelm them? We're such in a busy time of our society, and it's like, how do we integrate this in so they find some actual calm? Then we go down through, I start at the hips and then I go all the way down to on the kidney 1, one of the major points in our body. It's so profound and effective to calm the mind. So if someone's really spinning out, hit the kidney 1, or they call it bubbling well, because that's where we ground to the ground. It calms the spirit, revives consciousness, and grounds us. So where does that energy come from, and how do you get it out of the body and flowing and letting the body do what it needs to do? And that's what my practice is about, of letting the body seek balance and take over its own self. And then I have some educational stuff that I've done. I've done advanced and beginner Shiatsu and PTSD, but for any kind of stress or whatnot. And I have a book that's out. So it's all on my website at thomasschieffer.com. So if you want to get more involved and see what it is, and eventually I will be offering in-person trainings. So that's coming after pandemic craziness. And then there's my contact info. And now we're ready for some question and answer. And feel free to ask me questions. I'm happy to answer them. I get back to people. Definitely email me more than the other stuff, but email me and I will be happy to return your questions.
Thanks, Thomas. We do have a number of questions. I'll take them in order. I had a couple early on. And my first one is about the husband and wife pulse inequality. Have you found that to be consistent in varying degrees with all your PTSD clients, or have other patterns surfaced?
That's a major one I keep track of because it's concerning when there's such a variation between kidney and heart. And you'll see effects. I like differential diagnosis. So I'm going to look at the pulse in the husband and wife, but I'm going to ask questions, what symptoms are coming up, how they're reacting to me. Like I said, when someone gets really deranged, you'll see it. They get almost manic. And if they go into the severe husband and wife separation, you'll see them they're just not there. They can't function too well. So I usually don't work with extreme cases. I would refer extreme stuff out to like psychotherapists, but I'll do what I can. And I always don't try to take on the talk therapy part of it.
Right.
Hope that answers the question.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like you do see that pattern
Yeah.
fairly consistently, especially in extreme cases, yeah?
Yeah, especially in extreme cases when someone's manic and just in that severe separation of emotional intelligence, their kidney and heart just separates. And, and there's point protocols for aggressive energy, AE protocols for pressure, for acupuncturists and whatnot, or possession. They literally call possession protocols. And I've tried them with pressure point therapies, but I found that what I do is just as effective for pressure point. It doesn't translate always the same, what I found out, but I'm always up to interpretation of people's feedback of using those pressure point protocols because they're pretty solid. But a lot of my education is from like Leon Hammer. So if you look at any of his books and Lonnie Jarrett, they go over a lot of that. So if you want to find more information.
Yeah, and then I had a question about the herbal formulas. And later on in your presentation, you mentioned some herbal formulas that would boost heart and kidney yin and or yang. But I was wondering if in your individual PTSD diagnostics for herbal formulas, you found a number of formulas coming up fairly consistently that had herbs in them that also treated the phlegm issue.
Yep. So I always work with trauma. It's about interpretation of your environment. And it gets overwhelmed. So it usually involves some sort of digestion issue. You have an inability to digest your environment. So trauma is. It's like you can't take it in. You're denying it at one level. So I always have there's always something to work with spleen, spleen, stomach in there, some digestive component. I grew up with dyslexia, so I was like, my interpretation world was altered right from the beginning, and it's just seeing all those signs and patterns. When I look back, I was like, okay, how do I take this in appropriately and be able to digest it? My system's so fatigued. How can I work that up? And then you do it through diet too. I mean, use spices. Bitters are awesome. But if you're trying to build up the yin, that takes a prolonged time. That's half a year out. You really have to be consistent with diet, exercise, sleep, and then whatever herbs. And you're not going to like have that magic herb that's going to succumb over lack of sleep. Because I mean, I regularly get about 6 to 7 hours. I love my 8, but it's like I'm causing my own yin deficiency in one way. So it's like
behavior beats treatment, right?
Oh, so, it's like and I'm my worst patient too. And that's why I need someone outside of me to tell me, like, I am imperfect in the process. And in my perfection, I'm trying to help people not be like, not go through the same things.
Yeah.
So there are quite a bit of formulas. I can answer them more for someone who wants to ask specifically and email me. But First Classic, I think it is really good. It's a heart tonic, and usually people use it for sleep. We have the monkey mind of the heart. So it has like dragon bone in it that helps settle. And then our modern day is magnesium. I mean, that's same thing as the minerals.
Cooling.
Deficiency is huge. And if people are taking pharmaceuticals, they're stripping those basic minerals and trace minerals out of our body that our body needs to function a certain way. So like I went for a 10-day sit and I sat for 10 days straight meditating. Of course, I mean, you walk around and whatnot, but my glutes were not used to sitting that long and they got pissed off. And I had a sciatic nerve problem for 5 months. I got rid of it in 1 hour because I took the right dosage of magnesium because I was so deficient. I took 1,600 milligrams, which I usually tell people 800 to 1,000 milligrams to start and see where you are, because then you get loose bowels and you'll know you're taking too much. And then you find that the body starts filling up with magnesium reserve. And then like literally it was funny because like 1 hour, it was gone. I was like, I wish I knew 5 months ago. It's so much pain, but that's why I try all my formulas on me. And lately I've been into trying CBD, and that's been fairly effective for me.
Yeah, good. So
Sakiko
Mori there. Yeah. Sakiko Mori has a comment. She says, thank you for doing this webinar. And then she would like you to talk a little bit more about how you got started with the acupuncture and shiatsu group, the community situation. And she comments that it seems that acupuncture is widely encouraged and incorporated by the VA, which we talked about last month. But she's interested in how shiatsu practitioners could work with the VA.
That's a very good question, and I'm trying to learn that myself. And for the people out there, one of my things is accessibility, because I came from a pretty hillbilly background, that this stuff was not, like I was working construction my whole life. I did not know about this stuff. This is like, Karate Kid stuff, It was like kind of this cool movie-like thing. So I started getting into it. So what was the question again? I'm kind of lost myself, sorry.
Yeah, maybe if you could just tell us about this community acupuncture situation where you did
community acupuncture.
like how that came about.
So getting into this, I wanted to make it accessible for people, and I just went over to the community acupuncturist and started talking to her. At that time was Greenfield, Massachusetts, and she had a VA window, and because I worked with so much veterans, I had a connection with that culture, and I wanted to help that culture out. So there's a 2-hour window every week, and then I just transition. I put my mat in between all the chairs, and then we just rotate through. And she was totally happy. I mean, donation only. So sometimes I'd walk out with a little bit of cash in my pocket, but tons of joy because I'm helping people out that I wanted to help out. And it's just a fun culture. It's nice to have. I work with veterans because they're particular. They're very appreciative, and they're a very tight culture. So once they start learning someone's helping them out, they spread it out to everyone. So everyone starts showing up, and getting the VA is hard. I want to do a study, and that's what I'm working on. I'm working on a grant from the massage something. So if anyone has grant help, I'm looking to do a study with 30 clients in over 8 weeks. And I wrote it up with a few professors. One of them, Angela, she's on my team. She's a professor out of DC, I think she is.
Yeah, so it seems like, look around your local.
How do you make it accessible? Because one thing is the validity of Shiatsu I haven't seen it's there, and not enough studies are behind it. And that's what the VA is going to look at. Yeah. And they might be getting a little bit better about allowing more diversity without that confirmation, but it's also, will insurances pick it up? Because I want to make it accessible to more people. And when insurance pick it up, then they have it access to just make it a lot more accessible to people.
Okay.
So it's
Valerie,
work in progress.
Yeah.
What's that?
Valerie Coleman Polanski wanted to get a little bit more information about that community acupuncture again. The body practice versus the acupuncture. Seems like we covered that a bit. you set up, you were with the acupuncturists, you did your thing, they did their thing. And, I had that kind of experience when I was volunteering on the Navajo Nation. We had acupuncture, moxa, and body work, and we just assigned, clients according to their needs. But
does that explain it enough? Did I articulate it? I mean, it's just a matter of going over to these organizations and asking if you do shiatsu. And a lot of the time, because of expense, sometimes you just have to donate your time, and get it in front of people, and they see, oh, this is quite effective. Like my first client, who was that tunnel rat, like he was astounded by how effective it was. And I was too. I was like, this stuff really works. And it's just nice to see like you doing something effective to help someone out of pain. And I was like, I love this. This is the whole reason I'm in it.
Yeah. Good. So Cheryl, thanks you for your service and dedication in working with trauma clients. Excellent presentation. Let's see. And Dor Haberer, what is your favorite technique to help release a lot of energy?
Oh, kidney one's huge. It's about grounding. It's you use the Jing Well points. I mean, that's what, like I was saying, you always lead from the center out. Because when I started learning Qigong, Tai Chi, he says always lead out unless you're deficient. So that's the basic thing. Just look, how do you move energy out? Because we're always in excess unless we're very young or very old or very ill. So if you want a particular point, use kidney one. We're always in our heads and detached from our bodies for most part, I think, as a society, and I get that way myself. Sometimes I'll walk on a cold floor with just my bare feet, just for a short time, and it reconnects that connection and brings all my thought patterns down. Or you could press on like kidney one, so boop, right there. Okay. And it's so effective, and it revives too. It's not just sedation. It's to bring someone up. You're connecting back to the earth.
Good. So Adriana Martins says, beautiful presentation. Thank you. And then Kara Esborg has a question regarding the other two authors that you mentioned to read about PTSD.
Okay. So, let me pick it up. So I have all the books here. So it's right there. So I have Leon Hammer has a book called Heart Shock, and Dragon Rises and Red Bird Flies. Those are two of his trauma books. And then there's a whole nother person, was it C.T. Holman, Treating Emotional Trauma. The black and red book over there is Lonnie Jarrett. All of them are pretty heavy books, so it's good to know some Chinese medicine before you go in. Then there's my book there, where I give a lot more simpler understanding of what's going on. Basically what I've explained through here. That is not cool, sorry.
Okay. And then Mary Haney says that her passion is working with women of trauma with addiction, sexual and physical abuse history, and wonders, are you aware of any studies being done in this area?
No, I haven't. Like, that's a great place to go because of just my understanding of how much is out there, especially with the women in there. So yeah, what I would say is step into this stuff. Have your heart leading first, and you'll figure stuff out, and just check in with people. And whenever they feel comfortable and loved, they'll give you feedback, and they'll also create the healing there. I have not seen a whole lot of studies, but there should be. There's a lot of sexual trauma out there. That's just what I said. Healthy touch is important, especially women, but it's both genders, men and women. So it's like, how do you, I work with veterans who haven't had anyone touch them in a healthy way. So like, how do you create that security again in the women and have that healthy touch so they could feel like not everyone's an evil person and there's a healthy way to interact even on that kind of intimate way. and professional way.
Yeah.
So I would say go for it, please.
Yeah.
It needs to happen.
Okay, so Debbie, she just popped in. She
Yep.
mentioned the member meeting. I'm going to hand it over to her to wrap it up.
Thank you, Thomas. This was wonderful. Thank you for your
Thank
heart.
you. Thank you so much. I'm privileged to be able to like share this information. It's only in community that we could work together and find these answers and help each other out. And I'm happy to help other people out. And there's more to come, and wonderful organizations like the AOBTA opening up to this and sharing this information. So thank you guys for allowing me to speak, get on my pulpit and my soapbox and speak what I love.
Thank you. Well, you're going to have more chance. You're going to be at the member meeting
Okay.
on the 28th, right?
Yep.
You want to invite people who are interested in this and also people who have experience working with trauma to make it kind of a roundtable. So you can share experiences and you can also ask questions, further questions of Thomas and other people. There's also, so that's Thursday, January 28th at noon, and you can find that on the calendar on our website, aobta.org. And there's also going to be a student member meeting on Friday, January 22nd. That's tomorrow at 11 a.m. And that's for people who are still in the process of studying. So please, if you are a student or you know someone who is, please let them know about that meeting. It's also, you can find it also on the calendar. I also just want to put in a plug for the convention. The registration is open, the information is there, so please take a look. You can get to it through the AOBTA website at aobta.org and click on the registration information for the convention. You can see about all our wonderful presenters and all the wonderful topics that we're going to be studying. And I have to say, this is an incredible value. An incredible value for what you're going to be getting. So please take a look. The next Connect and Learn is going to be on February 17th with Bill Helm, who is a Tuina and a Taoist teacher. A lot of people probably know Bill. He's been around for a long time. And I also want to remind you that at the end of this session, there will be a survey that will pop up asking you for feedback about this webinar. Please fill it out. This gives us a lot of help in looking at what we need to be aware of, what your response is, and suggestions for what you'd like to see us do in the future. Okay. So once again, thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you.
We'll see you all next month.
Thank you everyone for joining. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. We're going to close.